Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the William T. Grant Scholars Program webinar. We're very excited to have several hundred of you joining us today. My name is Vivian Sun. I'm the Vice President of Programs here at the Foundation, and I also oversee the Scholars Program. With me here today are two people. First, our new president, Adam Gamron, who started at the Foundation in September. We're very excited to have him on board. He'll be speaking a bit later about our new research interest in inequality. I also have here in the room with us Kim Dumont, who is our program officer, and Irene Williams, who are our William T. Grant Scholars Grant Coordinator. And between us, we're going to give you some background on the program and help you think about applying. So let me tell you quickly about the overview of what we're going to do for the next hour. First, we're going to talk about the Foundation's research interest. Then we're going to talk about the program itself, some of the basics of the program, as well as some tips if you decide to apply. If you have questions throughout the webinar, we encourage you to type them in. There are some designated times in between what you see on these bullet points where we will stop and answer some of those questions. There's also quite a bit of time at the end of the presentation for us to round out those questions. Now, I want to also note that if you don't get to ask your question, or if you don't hear us answer them, don't fear, because we will be recording these questions and we'll be using them to develop an FAQ, which we will post on our website. So never fear. So to begin, we want to talk to you a bit about our current research interests. For those of you who are familiar with the Foundation, you know that we have a long-standing interest in supporting high-quality empirical research on youth ages 5 to 25 in the United States. And our current research interests focus on two areas: ways to reduce inequality in youth outcomes and the use of research evidence in policy and practice. And those are the two interests that we're going to talk about in a bit more detail today. But in addition, I want to note that we have had a longer standing interest under our prior president in understanding how youth settings work. And so for this grants program, for the Scholars Program, we're offering the opportunity for applicants to also apply under our social settings initiative for this year only as we transition our interests. And the reason for that is because many of the successful applicants to the Scholars Program are re-applicants. So they've been able to apply in the past, get some reviews, use those reviews to improve their proposal, and we did not want to disadvantage those applicants. And so what I want to make very clear is that people who choose to apply under the social settings for 2014 will not be penalized or disadvantaged in any way, but applicants do need to weigh this with the knowledge that we will not be continuing to fund specifically in our social settings interest going forward. But if you are, and we're not going to focus a lot on these social settings interests today because there's a lot of information on them that are posted on our website, and I would encourage people to simply reference those resources. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Gamron, who's going to talk about our exciting new interest in reducing inequality.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk about the Foundation's new interest in reducing inequality among young people. The interest in reducing inequality. Here's where the Foundation is coming from. We recognize that since the 1980s, income inequality in the United States has grown. At the same time, there is recent evidence that shows the effects of inequality on child and youth outcomes is increasing. So if you put those two facts together, the increase in inequality and the increasing effects of inequality on child outcomes, we come up against a real crisis situation. And moreover, the chances for social mobility are getting worse or are at best frozen for the last several decades. So putting putting all those factors together, our staff and board arrived at a determination that reducing inequality could be an important new direction for the foundation. Along with income inequality, disparities by race and ethnicity, by immigration status, and by language minority status are of special interest to the foundation. So we seek research proposals on programs, policies, and practices that reduce inequality in youth outcomes. By programs, we mean coordinated sets of activities designed to achieve specific aims. Policies are intended to promote success through the allocation of resources or the regulation of activities. And by practices, we refer to materials and activities through which youth development is enabled. We have particular interests in outcomes in the academic, social, behavioral, and economic realms. However, we're willing to consider proposals that address other outcomes based on a compelling case for their importance. We are interested in inequality across the full distribution. So, of course, we have special concern for our most vulnerable citizens, our most vulnerable young people, those in poverty, those who are struggling to make ends meet. But we also recognize that inequality is a challenge across the full distribution. For example, middle-class families now struggle to send their children to college due to the increasing costs of tuition. And so this would also be fair play for our research interests. Now, one can imagine, now, of course, you could reduce inequality by pulling down people from the top. That's not our focus. We would like to reduce inequality by improving opportunities for the disadvantaged and improving their results rather than on holding back those who are already succeeding. Now, one could imagine two different ways that a program, policy, or practice could provide leverage to reduce inequality. First, we might be able to identify such programs or practices or policies that are especially effective for disadvantaged young people. Then, if we apply those programs universally, we'll get an extra boost for our most disadvantaged young people. But another way does not depend on differential effectiveness. Here, if we can identify conditions that help everyone succeed, they can still have a gap-closing effect if we apply them disproportionately to those from disadvantaged circumstances. So again, we're interested in both of these kinds of approaches to reducing inequality. With this program, proposals should be clear about at least three elements. First, the domain of inequality. So, what area of inequality are you addressing? For example, low-income students falling behind in school. Second, you should be clear about the leverage point for reducing inequality. What is it? What is the factor that will reduce the inequality that you just described? For example, a program that improves school climate and keeps students engaged might help address this problem of low-income students falling further behind in school. And third, we want to know specifically what your indications of success. For example, improved classroom quality and student outcomes. Most of the research that we fund, we expect will address outcomes for youth, but we would also consider more proximate outcomes based on a compelling case for their relation to the outcomes of interest. Our goal in this program is to build strong theory and compelling evidence about ways to reduce inequality. And we do have some resources that will be coming online shortly. For example, I'll have an essay in our annual report that will elaborate on the themes that I've laid out for you in this conversation. And we have commissioned a number of papers that we hope will be agenda setting, that will stimulate your thinking about the challenges of reducing inequality in particular domains. So one will be on social inequality, another one on immigration and education, a third on juvenile justice, and several other topics. And these will be released beginning in June and lasting through the remainder of the year. Now I'd like to open it up for some of the questions that have come up.
So Adam, we have a couple about what forms of inequality and what kinds of outcomes are we interested in. Part A is, would we be interested in inequality due to sexuality? So comparing LGBT youth, for example, to straight youth. Would we be interested in work that looks at health outcomes?
So let me take the domains of inequality first. So as I mentioned, our particular focus is on inequality by income or socioeconomic status, race or ethnicity, immigration status, and language minority status. But we're open to other dimensions of inequality based on a compelling case for their importance. A condition such as inequality by sexuality might be especially fitting in our portfolio if it intersects with one of the other dimensions. I would say similarly about gender inequality. But we're open, and we expect to be in a dialogue with the field, and so we would be open to any other domains of inequality that people might raise based on a compelling case for their importance in understanding youth inequality. Now, with respect to the outcomes that are our central focus, once again, we've placed a priority on academic, social, behavioral, and economic outcomes. Within social and behavioral, I certainly include mental health outcomes. With regard to physical health, once again, here we would need an applicant to make a compelling case for why this domain should be included, and we're prepared to do so. And again, the health outcomes might be part of a package of outcomes that would cut across some of the domains that I've already mentioned, as well as physical health.
So another question that we have concerns preferences for a particular geographic region and inequality and how those might relate.
Yes, we are focused on the United States, but beyond that, we do not have particular preferences. So we, by our charter, are focused on youth inequality in the United States, but we're interested in inequality in any region or domain, or urban, rural, north, south, east, or west of the United States.
And either Adam or Vivian, what advice might you give an applicant who's reapplying and thinking about shifting their interest from the setting proposal they initially did to inequality?
Vivian, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that one. So I think it's up to the applicant to decide what is best for him or her. You know, we are wide open. We're not going to penalize, so you will neither be advantaged nor disadvantaged from going one way or the other. But I would encourage applicants to consider a couple of things. One is, what is it that you are really interested in? Because this is a 5-year plan that you're proposing. So it has to be not just to fit with our interests, but it has to really be something that you're very interested in. So I would strongly guide it and influence by that. And then the second consideration to just keep in mind is that this is our transition year for social studies. And so this is not going to be the same going forward.
We also had some questions about whether or not the Scholars Award could be related to or include analysis of secondary data. And I was wondering if you could think about that.
Yes, we're interested in secondary as well as primary data. We're interested in a compelling research design, and I would say that the design should fit the question, but if you have a question that can be answered productively with secondary data, that's absolutely fine.
We have another question about regional inequality, rural versus urban, for example. Is that something that would fit the Foundation's interest in inequality?
Yes, I think that's a great question. To a large degree, regional inequality in the United States can be traced to some of these other dimensions that we've been discussing. Income, race and ethnicity, immigration status, language minority status. And so I think we would be interested in regional differences. State-by-state differences in many realms are very salient, especially in education. So I think we are interested in them. But I would advise the applicant to be sure to trace through the extent to which those regional differences are related to these other domains of inequality, and the extent to which they're not related as well.
So we had one question, and I think it also relates to the shifting interest between settings and inequality, but do you have a preference for particular units of analysis about the outcomes? So,
yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Kim. Our focus on inequalities is intended to build on our long-standing agenda on understanding and improving the social settings of youth. Social settings can be an important vehicle through which inequality is addressed. The context in which young people live are both important causes of and can be part of the response to inequality. Families, schools, neighborhoods, after-school programs, all of these can play an important role. So certainly we are very open to settings level or contextual considerations in understanding inequality. At the same time, the primary focus is on inequality and on responses to inequality, whether those responses are delivered at the contextual or at the individual level.
great, thank you.
So let me pause here. I think what we're going to do now is shift and talk about the Foundation's interest in the use of research in policy and practice. If we haven't gotten to your question again, don't fear, because there will be time at the end of the webinar again for questions. And as I mentioned, we will be turning these into FAQs that we'll post on the website. So the Foundation has an ongoing interest in studies that examine the use of research in policy and practice. And this reflects the Foundation's longer-standing interest in supporting research that's informative, that can inform policy programs and practices to improve the lives of young people. But we recognize that even as the research base is growing and it's becoming stronger, we are not satisfied that research is having the impact that it could. And we and others have been doing a great deal to strengthen the rigor of research, in essence to improve the supply of it. But we know that we still have too impoverished an understanding of the would-be users of research, of the ways in which they, and when and under what conditions research is used. You could think about policymakers, administrators, service providers in a range of different areas: child welfare, juvenile justice, education, youth programs, mental health. We have very little understanding of how these key decision makers use research, under what conditions they use research, and this is what we're trying to build. Ultimately, we're interested in strengthening the use and usefulness of research. And we seek to do that by building strong theory and empirical evidence. And so that's the theme you're hearing throughout our research interests. We have these topics that we're interested in, but we're interested in building stronger theory and an empirical evidence base on those issues. So let me step back a bit and talk a little bit about what we mean by the use of research, because it's a relatively new field of study, and so it's worth just talking about what is this phenomenon of the use of research. And when it comes to thinking about the use of research, the most common thing that comes to mind is often the instrumental functions that research serves. This is the idea that research should directly influence a decision. It's part of a rational, linear model of decision-making that predominates our thinking very often. But of course, if we really step back and think about it, decisions, whether they're decisions made by a child welfare administrator when it comes to evidence-based practice, or whether it's a decision by a legislator about a piece of legislation, it's rarely just research that would influence that decision. Decision makers also bring their professional judgment, their experiences, and what they know from local data about their clients' needs. They're also considering the political ramifications and the values that are at play. So, for example, they're thinking about what would be the political consequences of any decision they make, and what are their values telling them about the decisions to be made, or what are the values of parents or others in their communities. And of course, they're also thinking about the constituencies. I've already mentioned parents and families, but they're also thinking about their staff. Their staff, whether they are caseworkers, or police officers in the criminal justice system, or teachers in the educational system. So this is the more complicated milieu in which research would come into decision-making. And it's in this more complicated decision-making context that we're trying to understand how research can come to play a meaningful role. Now, research could have more instrumental functions in influencing decisions, but it can also play a role in influencing the way people think about and understand problems and orient themselves to particular solutions. So Carol Weiss in the 1970s and 80s did some classic work on the use of research. And she describes this way of using research as its enlightenment function. So research enlightens the ways in which people think about problems and how they orient themselves to the solution. She talked about this as probably the more common way in which research has influence in policy, that it kind of gradually seeps into the policy-making context. And then there's a gradual sedimentation process as it influences people's thinking. Now, of course, many of you are also familiar with the strategic or political uses of research. And this is when people already have staked out their position. They know they support a reform effort. They know if they oppose a reform effort. And research is just used as part of their political strategy to support their efforts. And so they use research to persuade others that that's the right course of action. So the foundation's interest, then, is these empirical studies that can enrich explanations of when, how, and under what, and to what effect research is used. We're also interested in studies that examine attempts to improve the use of research. So, for example, if there are various attempts out in the field to improve the ways in which research is used by different stakeholders. And our goal is to systematically learn from those attempts. One example that's becoming more popular in mental health, child welfare, and education are research practice partnerships. And there's an opportunity there to learn from those partnerships in a systematic way. Are they indeed leading to greater uses of research evidence? And if so, through what mechanism? We're also interested in projects that improve methods for studying the use of research. And early work in knowledge utilization, which is a field that Carol Weiss really pioneered, relied a lot on self-report methods that asked individual decision makers about their perceptions or attitudes towards research or different types of research. So they were very perceptual. They were, do you find this kind of research or that kind of research more or less useful? What is your likelihood of using this kind of research or that kind of research? And those kind of methods generate a lot of demand characteristics, especially in this current context where there's so much emphasis on using research and using evidence. They were also limited because they weren't actually assessing people's particular uses of research in the context of their actual day-to-day work or in the context of a particular decision or discussion, deliberation that was taking place. So we're interested in methods and measurement works that are more in situ, that get at some of the phenomena within the context of the actual work, and that can help us build our understanding of these constructs, not only around how research is used, but some of the forces like social networks that influence the acquisition and use of research. For those of you who are interested in applying under this interest, I strongly encourage you to take a look at this supplementary guidance, which is available on our website. This is a more detailed discussion of our interest in this area, and it includes guidance for applicants in developing different aspects of their proposal. So let me pause there and take some questions on this research interest.
here's a good question. You mentioned that in fact, both of us mentioned that our goal is to build strong theory. One of our listeners would like to know, what do you mean by strong theory versus weak theory? What do you mean by strong theory?
Work that has a strong theoretical foundation is drawing on prior work, whether it's work that's directly related to, for example, prior work on the use of research evidence or related areas such as deliberation or cultural exchange, and applies it to the specific current project. And what I look for in good theory is that we're not looking for grand social science theories because that can explain everything. What we're looking for are strong explanatory frameworks. In the realm of the use of research evidence, strong explanatory frameworks that help us better predict when, how, and under what conditions research evidence is used. And a good research project that builds theory or tests theory has to be able to provide strong empirical evidence to support or refute specific elements of that theoretical framework.
Thank you. That was so helpful. Now, there are a number of questions about logistics, duration of projects, how you apply, and so on. And I know you're going to be turning to that very shortly in the webinar, so I'll hold off on those questions until the end. We'll see if those are answered in the next section of the presentation. But I do have some more questions about your presentation that some of our listeners have posed. One person is asking about our interest in interdisciplinary efforts, so you might take that separately. And then secondly, about including work that might integrate social and biological or genetic factors. So first about interdisciplinarity generally, and then about the intersection of social and biological.
So the foundation has a strong interest in interdisciplinary work. That doesn't mean that all work has to be interdisciplinary, but we have a general belief that often bringing the best theories, approaches, methods from different disciplines to understanding a problem can be very important and useful. And in the Scholars program, people are often proposing to do interdisciplinary work. As I'll talk about later, there are certain career development and learning goals we're going to ask people to make in this program. And so many people often seek to expand their skill set by learning more about theoretical approaches or methods in another discipline, and so becoming themselves a bit more interdisciplinary.
Great. Another question that a number of people have asked is whether they need in the proposal to address both of these interests, or they should just focus on one.
So they can just focus on one if they want to, and I would say that the vast majority of successful applicants do just focus on one because it represents a natural sort of program of research. But certainly some people do cross over. So maybe the first or the second project focus on inequality, and perhaps the third one might move into the use of research evidence on the prior research on inequality. And that would be fine. We encourage people to think about what makes most sense for what they're trying to accomplish with their program of work.
Vivian, there's been a number of questions about what type or modality of research that we're interested in. For example, one person has asked, are we funding participant action research? Another asks whether we are interested in critical race theory. What's our stance on the particular research paradigm that someone might undertake?
We always start our reviews by thinking about what are the research questions, what are the goals of the research. So we don't start with what is the design or the method and lead from that, or what is the theoretical approach and lead from that. We have to take more of a problem approach. What's the goal of the research? What's the questions that's being addressed? And then we look at whether people are proposing strong methods and designs for studying those questions. So that's the way I think to think about it. And then, from the questions at the center, you can also back up to say, what are theoretical approaches or conceptual approaches that could usefully inform the study of those questions?
So there also seems to be a need for a little bit of clarification about studying the use of research evidence. And some folks are wondering if they need to take the evidence that they're generating to inform policy or practice, or whether you're interested in studying how evidence is used.
Right. So, Kim, that was a very well stated question because our interest is in the latter. For this research interest area, we want people to study when and how is research used by policymakers, administrators, service providers. So it's not researchers, we're not funding people to actually go out and make it happen, to make that use happen, but to build our understanding of when, how, and under what conditions it's more likely to occur. Great.
Okay, we have a number of other questions that cut across both interest areas and other questions about the details of how to apply. And I'm holding off on those for now, and I'll ask Vivian to continue on with the next part of the webinar.
Right. So we've now talked about the foundation's current research interest. What we're now going to do is move into talking about the program and then about application. The Scholars Program, the key thing to know about the Scholars Program is that it's a career development program. So for promising early career scholars who are within 7 years of their PhD, or if they have an MD, they're within they're within 7 years, starting with their first medical residency. Or the 7 years starts after their first medical residency. They're in career ladder positions, so people who are assistant professors and tenure-line positions fit that. What doesn't fit are postdoctoral fellowships, so this is not a fellowship. People have to be in a career ladder position. And you have to be nominated by your institution. And each college, a school of education or a school of arts and sciences, can only nominate one person per year. So if you're interested, the one thing you should do is contact your dean, if you're in a university, to find out what their nominations process will be. These are, as I mentioned, Career Development Awards. They are for $350,000 for 5 years. We typically award 4 to 5 of these per year. And because they're Career Development Awards, they're different from our regular research grants. In those research grants, you are applying for funding for a discrete project. This is supporting research. The Scholars Program is supporting research, but it's also supporting the person in their career development. So as part of that, applicants have to propose goals, ways in which they're going to expand their expertise. So for example, I mentioned earlier when someone asked about interdisciplinary work, some stretches might be to say, I am an organizational sociologist. I've been studying community-based organizations that serve adults for a very long time. My goal is to stretch to study how these CBOs serve young people. And so the stretch is to use development as a field, the theories, the methods that go along with that. So people have to propose ways they're going to expand their expertise. Again, it can be disciplinary approaches or it can be methods. Many people propose to expand their methodological toolkit so they bring more to the table in studying specific problems. As part of the application, you propose a 5-year research plan that's going to help you develop these areas of expertise. And you propose a 5-year mentoring plan. And the idea is you propose a few mentors that are going to help you develop these new areas of expertise and help you be successful as you expand your expertise so that you can publish in these areas and continue a successful career trajectory. And lastly, I just want to note that an important part of the Scholars Program is that we convene the scholars together in annual scholars retreats, and we invite them to other workshops that the foundation supports. And so this is important to emphasize because we're looking for young scholars that can become part of a broader community where there's a lot of give and take and learning from each other. Let me tell you a little bit about our review process. We have just issued our latest Scholars Application Guide. You will find that on our website. The deadline is July 9th, 2014. This is pretty much the same time frame we've been working with for many, many years now, and I imagine we will continue to, where applications are due in early July. The new application guides tend to come out at the beginning of the year. We start our reviews with senior staff inside the foundation doing an initial review to see whether applications fit with the foundation's research interests and whether there's a general fit with our research criteria. So are there strongly stated research questions or hypotheses? Does it seem like the research design and methods can reasonably answer those questions? Those applications that make it past that senior staff review are then sent to the Scholar Selection Committee. Each application is reviewed in depth by 2 selection committee members. Those selection committee members then meet, and from there they choose 10 finalists. Those 10 finalists are then invited for in-person interviews at the foundation. Before they come to the interviews, we send their applications out for 2 additional reviews. And we think of these as external or specialist reviews. The Scholar Selection Committee has a wide range of expertise, but they don't necessarily have the particular expertise that we see in all our applicants. So some of their reviews will be the more generalist reviews. These finalist or external reviews are very important because that's where we can go out and seek more specific expertise on the application. This is a list of our current Scholar Selection Committee. You'll see that Adam Gamron serves ex officio on the committee, and our current chair is Cynthia Garcia-Cole. Those of you who are familiar with some of these names may recognize that they are all excellent senior scholars who cross a number of different disciplines, from sociology to psychology, education, economics. They also bring to bear different methodological expertise, ethnography, econometrics, survey research. And so the thing to know is that this is an interdisciplinary group of selection committee members who will be making decisions. And I wanted to also show you our selection committee and what they look like on the very day of interview. So this is a picture of our Scholar Selection Committee at the last interview. Let me now dive into a couple of points and questions that I often receive. One set of questions is when I do this session live with people, is they ask, should they apply? Is this a good grant mechanism for them to apply to? And so my answer is twofold. One is, think about whether there's a strong fit between the foundation's interests and your research interests. Is there a genuine interest in the same problem? Are you interested in the same problem we are of understanding ways to reduce inequality in youth outcomes, or understanding ways that research evidence comes to be used in policy and practice? So that's an important point. The second is, do you have clear career development and learning goals that you want to pursue through a scholars program? If you don't, that's fine. If you just have a particular research project you want funded, then you might consider a research grants program, because that's a funding mechanism that's not about supporting career development. It's about supporting discrete research projects. So that's the other thing to consider. The second question set of questions I get asked pretty frequently is when should people apply? And the thing to consider here is that you're asked to propose a 5-year program of research. And so for most people, it takes a little bit in your career for you to be ready to have enough track record behind you that you can say, this is my area of expertise, and here are the ways I want to expand my learning and my career training. I will say that most applicants who apply are a bit further past their PhD, so they're not. There are people who apply their first or second years out from their PhDs, but usually people are applying a bit further into their after their doctorate. And this is just because they can have a stronger track record behind them to show that they are indeed promising scholars, and they're ready to propose ways that they want to stretch their expertise. I also want to add one more thing. I do not, if it's at all possible, I would not apply during your last year of eligibility. I would encourage people to apply at least a year prior to that. And that's because so many applicants benefit from a year's worth of reviews that they can use to improve their applications and then reapply. And so if you wait till your last year of eligibility, you won't have that option. So that's another thing to consider. Okay, so let me talk a bit about the research and mentoring plans, because that's also a core part of the application. And I just want to offer a few tips here. You will see detailed instructions on this in the application guide. So I'm not going to go through all of it. I just want to stop and give you a few tips to consider. One is that, and I think this is a general tip for applying for any grant, which is to pose important questions. That's a good place to start. Pose important questions and then pursue them rigorously. Don't try to spread yourself thin by pursuing and proposing lots and lots and lots of research questions, because no 5-year program of work can answer all the important questions. So start with some that are important and significant to begin with and pursue them rigorously. Because this is a career development award and you're proposing learning goals, craft plans that really fit those learning goals. Third, balance ambition and feasibility. These are 5-year awards, so you want to really think carefully and get some good advice so that you're balancing some ambition and some strong ideas about what to accomplish with what's reasonable and feasible given the time frame and the resources available. I recommend that people really go out and get a strong mentor or two. This is a requirement of the program, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is even in the application stage, because here's a good opportunity for you to also start getting some feedback from a senior mentor about the application itself. And then my 5th tip, and this is clear for any grant that you apply to, is just to write clearly and avoid jargon. This is probably particularly important for the Scholars Program because you will be reviewed by an interdisciplinary group of selection committee members. And they will not all be in your discipline. They will not all be trained in the methods by which you are trained in. And so the ability to convey in very clear, straightforward terms what it is you're planning to do, that's very, very important. I will encourage you to look at 2 places on our website. This is a screenshot of our website. On the left, you see circled funding opportunities. If you go under there, you'll see the Scholars Program. And if you click through, you'll find the application guide. On the right side, you see circled resources. And under there, you will find a set of resources on the foundation has compiled about setting the use of research evidence, also studying social settings. And if you come back in the future, you'll also see resources on studying inequality. So now, let's pause again, and we have about 15 minutes for further questions.
Okay, Vivian, I'm going to start with 3 questions that I've seen come up quite a bit. The first one is people want to just know the general success rate, how many applicants you're getting a year, and how many are funded.
Okay. So the number of applications varies, but I would say our funding rate is at about 10% right now. So for this year and last year, we received 50 applications, and we funded 5.
Great. Another series of questions concerns the mentors and your references and whether those need to be from your home institution or you prefer people to go outside of their institution, and how many mentors they should think about having.
So let me start with the references. These are 2 different sets of letters you should be soliciting because you don't want your mentors to be writing the reference letters. The reference letters should be people who know your work well, who can really attest to your promise as an early career scholar, and that this is, it's a good thing to select you. Now, when you're proposing mentors, you want to think about people who really will add value to your career development. So I don't encourage people, in fact, I discourage people from proposing their dissertation chairs or their mentors on their postdoctoral fellowship, because presumably you've already gotten quite a bit of mentoring and learning from those people. And this is an opportunity to say you want to grow in significant new ways, and you want to use this as an opportunity to reach out and find some additional people who can help you acquire that new expertise. Now that said, that doesn't have to be complete strangers, It can be, and that has sometimes been the case, but they might be people who have been more casual colleagues, whether in your institution or outside your institution. But here's an opportunity to really strengthen and build out a mentoring relationship.
Okay, and the last one I was going to ask you right now concerns how the Scholars Award fits with other funding that people might have. So people wanted to know if they had an NIH or NIH grant and they were interested, and that was funding one thing, but they wanted to ask a set of extension questions. Where would the scholars fit with that? And also, people had a question if they already had a K award for their development, could they also consider applying for the WC grant?
Okay, so if you already have a Career Development Award, a K award, for example, or a Spencer Postdoctoral Fellowship, you are still eligible to apply for the Scholars Program. The key, though, is to make a good case for what additional value would be added by this Career Development Award. So coming in with an application that really replicates something you already have funding for is not very compelling, because then you're just getting duplicate funding for the same thing. So make a compelling case for what additional value will be added.
Yes, Vivian, we've had some questions asking for more clarification on what we mean by a career ladder position. So some of the questions I think you've really already answered. For example, I am a postdoc and I'm moving into a faculty position. Can I apply? No, you're a postdoc. Once you're in the faculty position, then you can apply. What about a PhD student? Can I apply? No, you can't apply with your PhD student. But other questions about the career ladder are, what about for people who are not assistant professors but are not postdocs? For example, perhaps they're researchers at university-based or other research institutes. Are they eligible?
Yes, they are. So let me give you an example. Pamela Morris was a scholar when she worked at MDRC, which is a policy research organization with headquarters in New York City. So she was a researcher there, active researcher, and she was in a stable position at the institution. They nominated her for it. They were going to support her in various ways. So one thing to consider is there a career step there where there's some stability for a person that they can continue to to move up in the organization. The organizations take some fiscal responsibility for them, so it's not that one grant leaves and that person is going to be out of a job. There has to be some stability there, investment in that person on the part of the institution. And in fact, part of the application includes a letter of institutional support, whether that's from a place like MDRC or from the dean of a college.
Yes, another questioner, another listener has asked the question, has indicated that she has questions from an institutional standpoint, not from a standpoint of a potential applicant, but from the standpoint of an institution that might be supporting an applicant. And I would like to reach out to that participant and say, please add your questions to the mix here, because we're using these questions to develop our list of frequently asked questions, and we would very much appreciate knowing what those questions are so we can answer them. I'm guessing that one of these questions has come from a number of listeners, and this is a question about what proportion of time the scholar is expected to devote to research. Is there a particular expectation for a buyout rate? How does the institution affirm that that support is available? Does the scholar need to state, I will devote X amount of time to research? How does that work in the application?
So applicants must specify, and their letters of support should say, that they will be able to spend half of their time on research during the entire awarding period, at least half time, yes. Now that doesn't mean that all of the funds to release the person needs to come from the grant, and at times the institutions say they will also provide some release time so that the scholar can spend more of their grant money on the research itself. So those are the kind of things that should be noted in an institutional support letter. And this is very important because the foundation is looking for whether the institution is providing strong support for the applicant.
Are scholars living outside the United States eligible to apply?
Yes. Like all our grant program, scholars outside of the U.S. are eligible to apply, but the caveat is they have to be focused on our research interest, which is youth in the United States.
I have two questions I'd like to jump in with. One, someone's asking, how established do they have to be in, say, inequality? Do they have to have a track record of research in inequality in order to apply? Or can they use that as their stretch area and don't have to have a track record there?
So that's a very good question for the Scholars Program because we think that can be your stretch area. And in fact, we would be excited to bring in promising young scholars from other areas to the study of inequality. Now, that said, just saying inequality is your stretch is probably way too broad. So, but within that, within the study of inequality, people are encouraged to really focus in and propose more specific ways they can expand their expertise.
And Adam, we have a question for you from way back when, but I'm seeing it again. If people have been involved with the program of research or have an intervention that they're thinking about that started early in childhood, so before age 5, and they want to use it to look at impacts between the ages of 5 and 25, what would you do about that?
That's a great question, Kim. Thank you for retrieving it from the early bin of questions so that we make sure to capture it. Look, we're interested in research where the main focus is on young people within our age range of 5 to 25. So if the main work that took place, the experiences that the young people had were outside of our age range, then it really falls outside of our research interest. We are not seeking to exclude studies that might include some populations where the age range begins before age 5 or ends after age 25. But the main focus of the work needs to be within our age range.
Great. Some of the other questions that we have are very technical about whether there's support, financial support for the mentors at all? What the indirect costs are? And where can people either go, or do you have the answers to those questions?
So all of those details are in the Scholars Application Guide, which you will find on our website. But since you're all online, let me briefly also tell you the indirect cost rate for these awards is 7.5%. And what was the other question?
Was whether it's support, financial support for the mentor.
Oh, we do not provide financial support for mentors, but when they submit their letters of support for the application, they attest to being willing to fill out annual program reports that just tell us how the mentoring is unfolding and how it's going. And in return, we will give them $500 for the submission of those program reports.
We're almost at the end of our time, but here's a great question I really wanted to get in, Vivian. One of the applicants is asking about support for graduate students. Can the mentor award, can the Scholars Award be used to support graduate students?
Sure, it can be used to support graduate students or other costs associated with conducting the research. The thing to remember is these aren't meant to be scholarships, embedded within a grant. But, of course, supporting your students to conduct the research can be covered as part of the cost.
And scholars have an opportunity to obtain supplemental funding for additional students, right?
Yes, that's right. So scholars in years 1 through 3 of their Scholars Awards can apply for an additional supplement, which is focused on mentoring junior researchers of color. And that's also a wonderful mechanism both to support your development as mentors, as well as the career development of junior researchers of color.
And I want to take the last 2 questions because we're just about out of time here. One, there was a question about outcomes for foster youth. This is way back when we were discussing the Inequality Initiative. And I do want to emphasize, yes, that is very much within the realm of our interest. In fact, we're currently supporting some very interesting work on foster placements, foster care, return from foster care. So very much part of our interest. And then last, I'd like to take up the question about the types of institutions that we fund. So one of our listeners has noticed, has done some homework and noticed that many of our grant winners as well as the scholars work at large research universities. Of course, that's not surprising. Those are homes of substantial research infrastructure. But we're certainly interested in funding scholars at a variety of institutions, including liberal arts colleges. And the elements of a successful program would be the same as for a researcher at a Research 1 university. You will need to make the case that the college has the research infrastructure to support your project, but if you can do so successfully, you can put together a strong application.
Yes, and that's another good place for getting the institutional support letter to really spell that out.
Well, folks, we've come to the end of our allotted time, but this is not the last you'll hear from us because we're going to take what you've told us, what you've asked us, and make our frequently answered questions. We'd also frequently ask questions, and we'll answer them. I look forward to seeing many applications for our Scholars Program this summer.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.